Welcome everyone to another episode of Time for BL. This is the podcast where we review movies, TV shows, novels, and comics, all in the boys love genre. If you are as busy as me, or you feel too overwhelmed to move and you want to get back into reading, then I have the app for you. Audiobooks Now is a website that features great quality professional audiobooks from your favorite authors, where you can also discover new ones too. You get access to many fiction and nonfiction titles that you can download or stream and get great discounts on titles if you choose the membership. Use the link in the description to check out the titles in Audiobooks Now with 50% off your first club purchase. You can also download the app. So yes, I am back with a brand new episode of Time for BL, and on today's episode we'll be talking about Dragon's Reign by Wraith Rain, also known as Ex Aratare. So if you're going, what is Dragon's Reign? I haven't heard of this thing. Well, what's awesome about it is it's available as a podcast on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast, where the author Wraith Rain is reading it. It's very interesting, the concept of it. Basically, with her main audience on her website, wraithrain.com, they are creating the story together. The story, as far as its written format, is completed. We are getting the audio format on Spotify. It's about, I believe she said, 10 chapters behind. But it's still really interesting, a really interesting way to promote the book. I am enjoying the story so far. I'm about on, I believe, 110 or something like that with the chapters. I'd have to go back and double check to make sure. Now, basically the tagline that I pulled from wraithrain.com for the book is 8 dragon shifters rule the world, but then ordinary human Caden Bryce becomes the 9th, destined to be a mate to one of the 8. Yet all Caden wants is his old life back. Dragonkin Valerius, most powerful of all the dragon shifters, is none too pleased to find another dragon in his territory. But when the other dragon shifters come to court Caden, Valerius finds that he wants Caden as his own. So yeah, right there, I think it's kind of obvious where that story is heading. And it was pretty obvious as far as the romance, who was going to end up with who. I mean, you can just look on the cover of the book and you know who's going to end up with who. But it was very obvious with that story who was going to end up with who. But it was still really interesting to see all the dragons, especially coming, and what they had to offer Caden, and with a lot of them realizing, hey, I don't have to offer romance, I can offer power, I can offer friendship, and you know, seeing what they can offer that's going to entice this young man to want to leave his home. In this world of shifters, so there's a bunch of different shifters. There's raven shifters, fox shifters, rat shifters. You can become a different type of shifter for many different reasons. And what happens is when you become a shifter, you leave your family. One of the things that happens is you become immortal when you become a shifter. So you can't really live with your family. It's like you could live with your family, but you'd realize that they're growing old and you're just watching them grow old while you stay young forever. So I think it's more depressing. And you go to live really with your shifter family. So ravens go live with ravens kind of deal. There are exceptions to the rule, as there is a snake shifter that joins the police force, and basically he's just surrounded by wolves, lions, and other shifters of that sort. but you go to live with people who are like you, who can understand you better in a sense. With the dragon shifters, like it said in that tag, there's 8 of them. They all run a certain area. They all live in a certain area that they rule over. King Valerius rules over North America, basically. I had questions about that because I am not a geography buff, but I do enjoy geography in a sense. So I was like, okay, so he has Canada. Canada still has a prime minister. And he has the United States. The United States still has a president. How does that work? Shouldn't the United States then have a prime minister? Or did they just leave the same like setup in place to make things easier because there was a war and you want people, you don't want to change things too much for the humans. And there's a whole thing with that too, that I'm going to get to in a bit. But that kind of just had me like, so who runs the Caribbean? Because technically parts of the Caribbean are grouped in with North America. I don't know why, but it is. And I'm like, does he run Mexico? He doesn't run Mexico, but Mexico is a part of North America, is it not? Am I wrong? Is it Central America? Like, again, not a geography buff, but I do kind of have an idea of the placements of where countries are. And I was like, how does England feel about the fact that he now runs Canada? Like, stupid questions, I know. But yeah, one of the things is, because shifters are immortal, for example, raven shifters usually become lawyers, and because you have the option to get this immortal lawyer, why would you want to get a human lawyer? You know, like, especially if most judges are raven shifters, you're going to want to go with the lawyer you think is going to give you a better chance in your case. And if he's going to have camaraderie with the judge, then you're going to want to go with him. Another thing is, like, with politicians and everything, they try to keep the president and prime minister are human, and they try to keep certain positions just open for humans only, because of course, yes, if a shifter takes it, they're immortal, they can keep that position forever, and you don't want that in this society. But this creates one of the conflicts we see in the story, where of course there's a group that feel like the humans that are in power are not really in power. The shifters are running everything, and the humans are just figureheads in a sense, and don't have any control over the situation. And they feel like as humans they've become voiceless, and they're not they don't have the ability to grow anymore. You have college graduates like Caden, like in the beginning, he's talking, it's like he's a college graduate, but he works in a store selling like knickknacks and tourist stuff, t-shirts and plushies and all that stuff to tourists. And a lot of people feel like they've been stuck in those positions, or stuffed in those positions as humans, because all the professionals are now just shifters, which of course creates another inequality, because they have an easier access to the wealth, because when you're immortal you can store all this wealth. When you're human, you only have a certain amount of time to grow and gain your positions in life and gain wealth in life. But we also see that there isn't equality amongst the shifters themselves. We learn about shifters that are like, for example, swarm shifters. What's his name? Semi, the snake shifter I mentioned earlier, he is also considered one of the lower shifters because he shifts into a snake. And in the society, it's believed that whatever you shift, if you become a shifter, whatever you become, it's because of who you are as a person. So they see him as a snake now, like people see him as a snake, and that's why he was a snake. But he instead joined the police force and is working hard and showing that he is not a bad person just because he shifts into a snake. The spirit shifts him into a snake. He works hard and he does his job, and he's a great police officer. And of course, it's the belief that if you're a wolf shifter, you're aggressive, things like that. So yeah, this book does tackle some great topics about basically when the spirit chooses you, does this mean this is the kind of person you are? And understanding that people aren't one-dimensional. Everybody has layers, as they say in Shrek. Onions have layers. Parfaits have layers. Everyone has layers. And we meet Caden, who does something brave. He's a young 20-something-year-old, does something that is so brave that he is selected by a spirit to become the 9th dragon shifter. And because of this, he of course meets Valerius, and eventually they fall in love. I'm not even going to pretend they don't fall in love, but we found out it's deeper than that. There's more to it than just Valerius and Caden falling for each other. We learn about the spirits inside of them, and that the spirits in these in this world, they have feelings, they have names, they have these emotions as well, and they select people for different reasons. When people tell their stories of how they were selected, it's not that they were just selected, they died, and the spirits joined with them in that like brief moment between life and death, that they were formed together and given this second chance at life. And now they're not immortal in the sense that they can't be killed. They can die, but they are immortal in the sense that as long as nothing tragic happens, for the most part to most of them, they will not die. They can live for thousands of years, and that's Valerius. King Valerius has lived for thousands of years. He's again one of the 8 dragon spirits. They all run different territories and they all rule very differently. Valerius seems to be a very hands-off ruler, doesn't seem to be really interested in ruling, and it's like one of those like, then why are you here, sir? But yeah, he doesn't seem to be very interested in the idea of ruling or being a ruler. And I actually really liked that aspect of it, this like reluctant ruler who has everyone around him like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and he's just like, what? Can somebody else do it? Can you make that decision? Because I don't even want to be here. But he doesn't have a choice, because every dragon has their territory for a reason. There was a huge war, and all the dragons together could tip the scales, and so keeping everyone in their own separate territories is the best. So that's one of the conflicts of the story, of course, the fact that now all these dragons are coming together to woo Caden. And like I said, you get to see so many different forms of the wooing, with a lot of them off the bat realizing, look, I can't offer you love because obviously you and Valerius, you got that, but I can offer you this, I can offer you that, I can offer you safety, I can offer you money, I can offer you the opportunity to help people who are in need. And also we get to see how the different dragons rule their territories. My favorite is Jahara. She has all of Africa. The entire continent is hers. But she has created like this this group. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's like this group of women who she takes advice from. It's her counsel. And it's not like she just goes, let me get older women who can guide me, because she's older than all of them anyway. It's women of different ages. So she has a young girl who's like 13 years old in it, and she has old women in it who are in like their 80s, whatever. because she understands that counsel can come in different forms, and depending on your age you can see things differently. So she doesn't look at her youngest council member and go, well, you are inexperienced because of life. She understands that this is going to be the fresh eyes on the world, because she sees everything differently, from the fact that she was born after the war, the fact that she was raised in a world of shifters, the fact that she's now in this council as the youngest member serving their queen. Like, and I love Jahara because of that. She definitely rose the ranks in the very beginning. I was like, if I was a shifter, I'd be like, her, I want her. Like, I love you, but I want her to be like, we're just gonna work together. That's it. Now, how do I say this? So the story, I want to talk about the story for a bit, because the story is really entertaining. I do really enjoy it, but it was very predictable in certain parts, which is why I feel there were so many twists and turns that started in this middle. I think it felt like the story was going in one direction, and because it was so predictable, especially since the author was working with her fans while writing the story, I feel like the story was just becoming so predictable. They were like, hey, what about a twist? So we got a twist. And then it was, what about another twist? So we got another twist. And it was like, okay. All right, cool. I'm like, how many other twists do we need? How many other twists are we gonna get? It's still really interesting. I still, of course, really want to see where it goes. I can't wait for the rest of the episodes to finally be uploaded. I want the whole final thing. But it's very, it also made me, while I was listening, made me go, that would have been better. This part would have been better for like a second book. The first book should just only focused on this, and then like at the very last chapter, the last 2 chapters, we find out about this, and then that goes into a second book. But if the author is really looking at just doing a one-shot series with this one, I understand why that happened, but at the same time it felt kind of a bit of an overload of villains, because it starts out with this guy, he's the villain. Wait, no, this guy's the villain. Oh no, this group is the villain. Wait, who is the villain? That kind of deal. Maybe it's gonna come out in the end like, they're all villains. We're all villains, our own villain. Who knows? But yeah, it kind of had me like, all right, who is the villain? Who should I focus my hate towards? And maybe it's just that I read so many books where I know who the bad guy is, I know who the good guy is, and even when there's a twist and turn, we still know who the bad guy is, who the good guy is, and we can focus on that and that. Maybe that's it. Or maybe it's because as well, focusing on so many different villains and it's switching up to this person, there was space where we could instead, I mean, it's really hard because I feel like there was a lot of focus put on Caden and his family, and seeing how Mr. and Mrs. Bryce are dealing with the fact that their son is now immortal and that they might lose him. His little sister Tilly, like, thinking it's so awesome her big brother's a dragon, but also now understanding that there's a weight to it for her as well. It's and of course Caden basically coming into this world and the friends that he's made, his new best friend, his old friend, like there's so much there that I'm like, well, if instead of adding so many villains, what if we just focused on those relationships instead? Yes, they were really developed, but is there anything else we could have done with those relationships instead of adding this? It kind of felt like M. Night Shyamalan just shouting, it's a twist, over and over, Shyamalama Ding Dong, over and over again. I keep saying I refuse to use his proper name. And I still use his proper name because I finally learned how to pronounce it. That's on me, I guess. Um, what would I change? If there was something I would change in it, is one thing, and it's the editing. I actually really like the author's voice. She says she's not a professional voice actor over and over again, but I love their voice. I love the tones. I love that I can hear the characters coming out, especially Wally. Every time they do the voice for Wally, I'm just like, oh my god, I can see him. I can see what he looks like with that voice. Hey, kid. Now, when you go around there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I see it. I see it. And I love it. But there's so many times where the author is reading, like, let's say they're reading us the Dragon King Valerius, most powerful of all. I'm sorry, let me go again. Dragon King Valerius, most powerful of all dragon ship. And I'm like, that just took me out of the story. And it just imagining being so enthralled and being so deep in it, because they're doing such an amazing job with their voice acting skills. And then that happens, and you just stop. You just come out. You're just like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it was sucky when that happened, because I love this story, and I just wish the editing was better. It really was just the editing. So as far as the story itself goes, I am loving it. I only got lost really a couple of times trying to discern the dialogue and who said what. And kind of just had to play it over and be like, oh, okay, that person. But especially with the voices being used, it does make it a lot easier. The introduction of each dragon did make me want to know more about each of their realms, like to actually see their realms. Especially May, because she presents one thing, but then what you hear about her realm is completely different. So I kind of wish like that could be explored a little bit more. And another thing I noticed, so the classism is now between shifters and non-shifters, yet race still takes part. Now that of course happens a lot whenever writers, creators are trying to create places, things where race doesn't exist and we're all just one human race now. It's really hard to do that because you're still living in a society where race plays a big part, and so you're still going to write stories where race plays a big part. Now, this wasn't noticeable until she was describing certain characters. So when she was describing Caden and she just mentioned he had blonde hair, blue eyes, and blah, 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 it was like, okay, yeah, she's just setting it up for that. Describing his family, okay, setting it up for that. But then she started describing like some side characters, like news reporters and stuff. And she specifically mentioned that somebody was African American. It was the first time I heard her say that, and I was like, okay. And it was like, all right, cool. So I wasn't thinking like, oh, black people don't exist in her universe. I was thinking it was going to be more of a, I'm not going to mention skin color, I'm just going to mention how their hair texture looks and things like that. And maybe that was silly of me, but I thought that's what was gonna be done. And then, but because she specifically said that, all the characters that I was imagining with like the hair color, the hair texture or whatever, and then black or Asian or, you know, any other tone that is not white, kind of just made me realize, oh, they're all white, instead of it just like. And I mean, it's not a horrible thing to finally mention, but it was just like, oh, so the side character, got it, who we never see again, I don't believe we see him again. And it just kind of made me more aware as to how many characters were white, especially when the dragons come. When the dragons come, you're really like, here are all their races. But it's like, okay, cool. whatever, I guess. We got Jahara. She rules Africa, and she's awesome. She, I believe, was written good. I do worry as to where I'm reading with her. That's why I need to figure out exactly which chapter I'm on, because I feel like I'm farther than I think I am. But I'm worried that they're gonna, because of her story, I want you guys to go listen to it yourself, but because of her story of how she became a dragon shifter, like, it's trauma. And it was like, I felt like, in a way, it kind of went into the strong black woman trope. And we're tired of the strong black woman trope. We really are. She's awesome, and she has a great foundation so far from everything I've read, but I hope she is more than just this. I just want her to be more, and so far she doesn't seem to be her trauma. She seems to be running a very great realm that's doing wonderful things and is very advanced. So keeping fingers crossed, and I really hope, because I'm of course going to finish it. I really do enjoy it. I highly recommend it. I'm going to make sure I leave a link to the website so you can check out wraithrain.com. I'm going to leave a link to the podcast on Spotify so you can check it out, the podcast as well. You can start your journey into Dragon's Reign. I definitely give it a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. I guess an 8 out of 10. I definitely think it's worth the listen. I am very interested in reading it as well. I am enjoying it a lot, and I hope I get to read and listen to more of Wraith Rain's works, because they have a lot of shifter series and they do male romance. So they'll have a lot of options there. And if you're not into that, they also offer like some of the other stuff that they write. Like, there's a werewolf series called Crimson that when I was listening to the podcast and they talked about it, I was like, I kind of want to read that one. So that's something I'm definitely interested in as well. So let me know what you think about Wraith Rain. You can, or not Wraith Rain, about Dragon's Reign. Once you've listened to it, you can get in touch with me on Facebook or on Instagram. Just make sure you give me a follow and you just comment and let me know what you thought of this episode, what you think of the Dragon's Reign series, and what other series you'd love to have me review. I am hoping that this new setup I have is gold, because I am now in a room where I'm not sitting on the floor in my closet. I am in a chair. Awesome. I'm hoping it doesn't pick up too much sound. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I hope you are loving this series of episodes that I've been putting out. I've been working really hard on this podcast, trying to get everything to top-notch quality. So let me know. Leave your review, if that makes sense. And also, don't forget to check out the link tree. Not only does it have the links to my Instagram and to my Facebook, it also has the links to the audiobooks now. It has an extra link to the merch shop as well. And remember, you can support this podcast in many ways, and one of them is listening to it. So thank you so much, and see you next time when we make some more time for BL.